Welcome to Plato's Cave. I'm Jordan Myers, and today we are going to take another step towards escaping the cave by actually rewatching or re-listening to an old episode that I am transferring over from my other show, That's BS. So, as I said before, this show is basically the new start to anything that I'm doing related to philosophy, and that show is continuing to be a political show, a show about society, culture, a more laid-back discussion show. So this is an episode that I had previously done on That's BS, but I think it's relevant to this show and its topics, and so I'm going to carry it over. So here it is, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to That's BS. I'm Jordan.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Adam.
And today we're doing a part 2 of what was I thought it was a great part 1 that we did 2 episodes back on Aristotle and Aristotelian virtue ethics. So maybe we should do like a real quick recap of what we covered, and then we can go into, because we started to, at the very end of things, we opened up a lot of tensions between Aristotle's train of thought and some other ethical ways of thinking about the world. So I don't know, to kind of give just like a brief overview for people who may have not seen the first episode. Basically, Aristotle is the locus of his ethical concern is centered on living a good life and maximizing something called eudaimonia, which is I don't know, how, after listening or after partaking in our part 1, how would you guys describe eudaimonia at this point? In like layman's terms.
Just sort of maximizing virtues.
And importantly to add, it's maximizing virtues, but it's cultivating virtues in a way that is associated with action. That's a huge part of Aristotle's ethics is living an action-based ethical life, and it's basically making yourself into a more virtuous person with a better state of character. So basically, it's he has this virtue of the mean, or a doctrine of the mean rather, that's pretty famous, and it has every virtue is on a spectrum in between 2 vices. And each vice is either an excess or a deficiency of a virtue. And what was interesting, and what we sort of came across a possible dispute with Aristotle on, was we were considering if some of his more specific statements were wrong. For instance, he says that some things are not part of a spectrum, that murder of innocence, for instance, or rape or thievery or something like that is always wrong. And in that sense, he aligns pretty closely with Kant and a deontological view of the world. But we were sort of beginning to question whether or not we totally agreed with that. So Adam, you were sort of the first person to question if we really did buy everything Aristotle said. Because, I mean, the three of us, I think we all very much liked what he had to say.
Oh, right? Yes, certainly.
Mm-hmm. But we were sort of considering whether we could find anything that his ethical philosophy didn't really cover, or if there were kind of corner exceptions. So Adam, do you have like any, do you want to like flush out that thought anymore that you kind of had at the end of last podcast?
I mean, I could just sort of reiterate it. I mean,
that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, the idea that something like, even something as crazy as the killing of innocents, I mean, it strikes us, at a first glance as inherently wrong under all circumstances. But I'm not convinced that's necessarily the case, especially from, a consequentialist view, right? I mean, you could say that if human well-being overall were to be maximized through, an action of killing, say, 2 innocents, and just people who are listening, I give an example so it doesn't sound completely ridiculous. You know what I mean? Like, let's say something like, or like bombing in in the case of a just war,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you'd be killing innocents in the process of defeating a greater evil.
Yeah,
I'm not making a statement on
you're putting it
what
up. Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, given a just war,
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, bombing would be justified to defeat whatever, some great threat, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And as as a result, you'd kill innocents. So to say that would be wrong would be sort of, um, I think maybe a facile way of looking at morality. But then again, I'm sorry to contradict myself mid sentence here, but I guess the Aristotelian, um, sort of ethics in this case would be more on an individual level rather than like what a society would deem. I think
Yeah.
you know.
No, I know what you mean.
So remind me why Aristotelian ethics would find that unethical in
Well,
that case of killing.
so I mean, I should make a quick caveat. We're the three of us are pretty freely interchanging the word moral and the word ethical, or like morality and ethics. And that's fine to do. Just as a little aside, I should say that I don't think Aristotle views his project as ethical philosophy. I think he views it as morality, and I'm not really aware of the nuance there. But in his time, that made a difference.
Okay.
I'm not fully aware. That's more of just kind of like an asterisk for the audience if they're interested in that.
Mhm.
I could just imagine the difference being between like ethics is more on a societal level. Like what you know what I mean? Like what is ethically good? Should we is I don't know, investigating embryonic stem cells,
Mhm.
ethical for society rather than like moral. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like there is kind of like a difference in language there.
And I think there's also a difference between the type of like the style of project you pursue also. So there's two philosophy is basically divided into two branches. There's analytical philosophy and continental philosophy. And analytical is basically everything that we discuss. It's about kind of being as rational as you can be, getting down to the hard cases of the matter, kind of like deciding like, what do we think about this? What is the correct answer in this case, etc. But continental philosophy is more, it's more. I mean, the names almost give it away. It's less analytical, and I don't mean that in a degrading way. But I mean, you're familiar with like Stoicism and existentialism, things like that.
Yeah.
Those are closer to continental philosophy, and I think Aristotle is in the analytical train of thought, clearly, but he is the most continental of the analytical ways of looking at ethics, I think. So that is all sort of a prelude to talking about. I mean, yeah. So to your question, Brian, Aristotle is definitely writing in very individualistic terms, and so that could be a jumping off point for a lot of criticisms of Aristotelian ethics as maybe not necessarily being incorrect, but maybe being incomplete. So your question was, remind me again why Aristotle would think that action was wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would take an unvirtuous person to kill an innocent on his view, and that would be something that would corrupt the character of that actor. So, for instance, this is a pretty interesting tension between something like consequentialism and Aristotelianism, because what about an action? Maybe let's try to make it a little bit more personal than Adam's example, although it was a good example.
It was an okay example. It was off the top of my head. It was like
It was a great example. Don't sell your soul.
Yeah. What about something like? Okay, how about this? So what about if you're given the opportunity to steal a large sum of money, and for a minute, let's forget about the idea that you'd be caught, because that's just that's self-interested. Let's get that out of the way. So you're presented with this very easy opportunity to steal a large portion of money. And you're not that very wealthy yourself. It hits home for us. We've college loans, things like that. So we're not in a position to donate a large sum of money. But you can, you're presented with this scenario wherein you could very easily steal a large sum of money and immediately send it to Oxfam, and thereby help a lot of people who you otherwise wouldn't be able to. Now, if you kind of think about that from a consequentialist lens and an Aristotelian lens, you could arrive at two different answers. I think the Aristotelian answer is pretty clear, where he would say, no, that's a wrong thing to do, morally speaking, because you'd be corrupting or degrading your own sense of virtue by stealing, and it's sort of a flat out stop. Now, I should add too that a deontological view would say the same thing, but for very different reasons. So if Kant was asked that question, he would say, no, you ought not do that, but not because of the virtuousness or not of the act and what it would do to you, but because that it would Kant would say it would deny or go against the categorical imperative, which he has rationally derived. And then the interesting thing is that the consequentialist could have. So I see a way that the consequentialist could have either response. He could say yes, it's the moral thing to do, or he could say no, it's not the moral thing to do. So I kind of put that forth, Brian.
Okay, so maybe I'm misunderstanding Aristotle then. So I was viewing it that, okay, I agree with the idea that, it kind of weakens your, what's the language
Your
we're using?
character.
Morality, character? Okay.
Yeah,
It weakens your character on the front of stealing, but on the front of, because the end action is giving it away to people that need it. So aren't you then strengthening your character in one regard? So wouldn't it then align with Aristotle's view?
It's an interesting take on it. Aristotle appears to, and I should say I'm nowhere close to an expert on Aristotelian philosophy, but from what I've read at this point, it seems as though Aristotle is not wholly, but partially discounting the outcomes, and he's more focused on what partaking in a certain action does to the agent who's doing it, right? So it's a very and this is a criticism that can be levied against him, because you could say, like, look, I mean, Aristotle's way of looking at morality is great for just sort of like mundane life, but maybe it falls short for these big ethical decisions that sometimes we have to make. What do you think about that?
Okay, I don't know. It doesn't. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it. I don't see how it doesn't. I still don't understand why what I said wouldn't be true, because I don't understand how scope at all affects this.
So you're saying that you might view it as in terms of, like, so there's a vice that you're partaking in, which is, it's not greed per se because you're giving it away,
Right.
but you're doing an action that Aristotle flat out says is
Right.
is not part of a spectrum. So thievery.
Yeah.
But then you're saying that, well, maybe it should be outweighed by the fact that you're using that money and developing a virtue in giving it away, right?
I wasn't even viewing Aristotle's. I wasn't even viewing this as in like a like, if there's any kind of positive within the action, I was using it as compliant with Aristotle's theory.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't viewing. Okay.
I don't think that's the correct way to view it, but
Okay.
So Jordan, I've been thinking about your question, and I think you are right in saying that the Aristotelian method does fall short in real ethical concerns. It really does, because when you have competing values, I don't think Aristotelian ethics really points you into, it doesn't tell you which route necessarily to take. You know what I mean? Especially, let me think, what's a good example here? How about, let's say, you are someone in charge of drone strikes, right? I don't know why I'm on this topic, but we'll just go with it. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, so what are you valuing at that moment right there? So you're valuing your own virtues, which would be, you want to, preserve innocent life. You want to maximize well-being. So these would fall into what virtue would they fall into? Probably empathy, right? So, you want to maximize sort of like that empathetic curve in a way. But at the same time, your other competing value is the fact that you have obligations, and that kind of these obligations to your countrymen, to your family, to the soldiers out there fighting, right? So what sort of what sort of virtue would that fall under? Probably under loyalty, right?
Mm-hmm.
So here we have empathy and loyalty sort of you kind of have to choose between the two, and I don't think Aristotle necessarily gives a good answer to which one you should choose between. Right. So I think that's kind of what Brian was talking about, actually. So you have kind of like competing values, competing virtues in sort of like a major ethical decision.
Yeah, I agree with you that I don't think Aristotle lays out a good framework for competing values, or even between deciding, between a positive and a negative, like a value versus something you want to avoid. So I don't know. I don't know if this might be able to help us kind of clear things up, but there's this really interesting scale of different levels of virtue that's laid out in Aristotle's work. This would have been something excellent to have scanned that I could screen share, but I can probably explain it pretty well. So basically, if you think about like an action or like a situation that you're placed in, there's kind of three variables that are going on, right? There's what you think is the right thing to do, there's what you want to do, and then there's what you actually do, right? Those are kind of the three corners of every situation, right? So this is a bit of a detour, but might help us kind of understand other questions that we have about Aristotle. So there is a scale from best to worst, and the best is something like just pure virtue. That is where what you think is the correct thing to do aligns with what you want to do, and you actually do it. So here's the example that we can kind of use. So you wake up in the morning and you go downstairs into your kitchen, and you have a choice of blueberries versus Twinkies for breakfast. So the perfectly virtuous person thinks, okay, it's rationally better for me to eat the blueberries. And sorry, they also want to eat the blueberries, so that they're not even tempted by the Twinkie. And subsequently they actually do eat the Twinkie. Or I mean the blueberry, sorry.
Odd course of events there.
Yeah. He's a madman. He just eats the Twinkie. Just like
very nihilistic of him. Just like, yeah.
He's just like, I hate this world. Just eats the Twinkie. So that seems to be the highest, like the best kind of person you can be. Then the next best is encratia, which is strength or self-control. So this one's interesting. Is you go downstairs, you think, oh, it's rational for me to eat the blueberries, but you want to eat the Twinkie, but you have willpower, you have self-control, and you say, no, I'll eat the blueberries. And that's the position. I mean, honestly, I think that a lot of our ethical decisions are sort of placed in that framework, right? Maybe not ethical, but a lot of our personal decisions are placed in that framework, where it actually takes some work to overcome a negative pull towards the wrong thing.
Oh yeah, I certainly agree. I just I don't want to like, jump the gun here, but I just feel like this framework doesn't take into account what I just brought up though.
No,
Like
it doesn't. It doesn't. I kind of wanted to lay it out. I
because
meant
again,
to do this before. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say because like, one of the three, parts of the decision, what you want to do, what you know is right and what you actually do.
Mhm.
I mean, what if you don't know what's actually right?
Yes.
So like I feel like that's where that framework doesn't, fully fit. But I might have jumped the gun.
That's true. And I I didn't know this was going to come up, but there's some pretty interesting work by who is it? It's a philosopher. I can't remember. Maybe it's I think it might be the same guy that started the altruism movement, effective altruism. Will McCaskill. I think his graduate work was on moral uncertainty, which that'd be an interesting topic. But
Is this through like the lens of just sort of like a gut instinct? Because I
you
mean,
talking Will McCaskill's work or this work?
no, this work. I mean,
Aristotle.
yeah,
Yeah.
just as in like, what you think is right. Is this just sort of like a gut instinct, or is it something that has been rationally derived?
Well, that's interesting because it's rational. But Aristotle, there's not. I mean, you'll notice there's not a column here for what you just kind of intuitively think is right.
Sure. So I'm saying like in a situation where, you truly don't know which way, you should act, uh, given a circumstance, then, I think this framework fails because you need something to, differentiate between competing values.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think I mean I've thought for a while there's a weakness in Aristotle that sort of demands consequentialism to step in. And I mean that's what I've thought about it for a while. Sorry, is one of you giving like feedback at all? Do you hear that or no?
I don't hear it.
I
Okay,
don't hear it
sometimes
either.
I get a little echo.
I'm gonna mute myself and then
That's
for a little bit. Okay.
It's not that bad. Yeah. So I mean that's a good point, Adam. So maybe we can get into this part of it because I think that almost everything that Aristotle says is excellent stuff, but it is morally prudent only because it actually tends to very well fit into a consequentialist grounds for things. So this is interesting, but I sort of view Aristotle's entire work as a framework for something called rule-based consequentialism. Have you ever heard of act versus rule consequentialism?
No.
Okay. Well, it's interesting, and I think it ties into this really well. So there are two branches of consequentialism where act consequentialism says that whatever act will bring about the best consequences is the morally correct thing to do. And the other one is called rule-based consequentialism. And that would say that whatever set of rules that you can adhere to that tend to bring about the best set of consequences are the things that you should do. So it's interesting because you can quickly see where the two diverge. So act-based consequentialism is it's sensitive to the details of every single situation that you're in, and on a dime's drop it can switch what you're supposed to do because of the tiniest imbalance of consequences, right? So if I don't know, I mean if here's a perfect example. So have you ever heard of Peter Singer's like the shallow pond example?
I want to say yes, but remind me of it.
So Peter Singer came up with this thought experiment where, so pretend you're walking down the street, you have a brand new pair of shoes on, and they're $300, and there's this shallow pond right off the sidewalk, and you see a child drowning in the shallow pond. You would be a moral monster to not go just wade knee deep into that pond and save the little girl, right? And so on an act-based consequentialist grounds, you should always go and get the little girl. But what's interesting is that if you tweak the variables in that scenario just a little bit, an act-based consequentialist will flip his moral stance. So if, for instance, your shoes that you're wearing are these super rare limited edition like Louis Vuitton shoes, and you're actually going to you're going to sell them, and the money that you sell them for, you're going to donate to Oxfam, and you predict that you'll save 5 lives by donating that money to Oxfam. But if you wade into the shallow pond, you'll ruin the shoes and you won't be able to sell them. So you'll only save 1 life as opposed to 5. So an act-based consequentialist could say, no, like in this scenario, you actually shouldn't save the little girl because you're essentially killing 4 people. So that's act-based consequentialism. But rule-based might say something like, no. Like if you're in that scenario, it doesn't matter what you're on your way to go do or who you're on your way to go help. You have to save that little girl, no matter if you're going to sell your shoes to Oxfam or not.
Yeah, I mean that's a tough one. I'd probably say, I think for 99% of the population, you would just 99.9% of the population, you just go save the girl.
Yeah.
You're not gonna watch a girl drown, or even like just pass a girl that is going to drown, just because you're gonna go save some people just by selling some shoes.
Yeah.
But it's definitely an interesting thought experiment when you put it that way. I mean, you are essentially condemning 4 extra people to their death if you save the girl, given these parameters. Yeah, I've heard that thought experiment put forward in terms of saving African children by just cutting down on
nets,
yeah, of course, yeah.
Well, the interesting thing is that Aristotle here seems to kind of provide a very personal framework for rule-based consequentialism, because he could say something like, yes, like I understand that you're, by not saving that 1 girl, going to save 5 in Africa instead. But think about like what sort of impact that course of action would have on your character, right? Like that would be, it would tell us something like very interesting and sort of dark about you if you were the type of person who could just walk past a little girl and then go donate to Oxfam, even though you're doing the right thing, right? It tells us something like really interesting about your character.
Yeah, I mean, you're certainly a moral monster if you do it, probably. I mean, I wouldn't want to interact with you. I mean,
yeah.
I mean, or your sense of morality is very different from my own. Maybe not a moral monster, but very different from my own.
It's weird because you have that intuition to say you're a monster, but he's going to save 4 more children.
Yeah, but you also pass a girl drowning right in front of you.
Exactly.
So it's kind of like a twisted empathy. You know what I mean? It's kind of like almost like a robotic sort of empathy. Just like you don't have real empathy, you have like robot empaty. You know what I mean?
I had the choice of saving 1 unit or 5 units. I chose 5 units. It's only logical.
Yeah. No, and this is, I think like Aristotle, I think expressing that difference in terms of like a virtue and character is maybe even better than expressing it in terms of consequences, because the consequences are, if you just look at body count, it is actually better to walk past the little girl, right? In just purely terms of body count. But if you consider, you can say it in Aristotelian language and still have it play out in terms of consequences, what type of person you would be to be able to do that. Or do you get what I'm saying? It's best like conceptualized in Aristotle's terms, but I feel at least as though it holds true because of the consequences of the scenario, right? Because like the type of person that would do that is probably not the type of person who see, I don't know. It's just like it's really hard because they are actually saving more people. Like you almost want to say like, well, that's not a person that I would want to interact with, but like it's I think people who brush over this are not giving it its fair due, because like I agree. If I saw you do that tomorrow, I'd be like, Jesus Christ, like he's a monster. But but you are saving 4 more lives.
There's another angle you could consider. It is like the societal impact. It's like does you could argue that in saving that one life, he's enforcing a society that cares for people, because otherwise, like, then you just have like whenever someone's drowning, you just see people standing on the wayside just calculating the moral cost, which is like some sort of, you know, dystopian world. So I think there is an argument to be made about the societal message you're sending, and I think if you put that into the equation, then it sort of tips the scales the other way.
This is interesting. You're sort of inherently referencing. There was this study that was done that shows that it's analogous, but not directly. Sure. There was this study that was done that showed that people who were more consequentialist were actually found to be worse friends and worse like romantic partners than people who were deontological in their skew. So it's weird. You can kind of relate to this, right? Like if you saw someone like you're across like this big pond and you see someone on the other side and there's a girl drowning, and you watch that person kind of deliberate over the moral calculus, like all the while this girl's screaming like, "Help me, please!" She's drowning, and he goes like,
"Shut up!"
He's like, "The consequences do work out," and then he dives in to save the little girl. Right? Like you kind of view that person as like not a psychopath, but like something close to a psychopath, right?
It's me, Captain. Was it Consequentialist? Like Captain Hindsight.
Yeah. So that's true. But I find it very hard to brush away the counterfactual that he could actually be saving 4 more lives also.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's maximizing the empathy at that point. I mean, I'm not sure he's even capable, given like, you know, his character that the way we described it. But you know, I don't think it's very odd.
So for you in this scenario, Aristotle's concerns do outweigh consequentialist concerns, then?
Yeah, most certainly. I mean, like
okay.
it's. I mean, you're kind of a bit of a freak if you. I mean, you are just a very, I guess, logical in your thinking, but devoid of empathy.
Mm-hmm. So,
I can't describe that as being empathetic. Just like, you know, simply weighing 5 people that you've never seen. You don't know they're suffering, and they're sort of just like 5 imaginary people in your mind that you just know you're going to help save, because you know nothing about these people. You're like, statistically, I will save 5 people, so I'm going to pass by this drowning girl right in front of my eyes.
Yeah,
I mean that's a very robotic way of thinking about the world.
It is. So here's what I'm curious about then, Adam. I agree with you, and I think I know why I think that, but I'm curious to like kind of flesh out why you think that. So it seems to me like what you've just stated was there are some scenarios in which you value consequences more than character, and there are also some scenarios where you value character more than consequences. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious because unless we want to kind of go into this reflective equilibria about it, I'm curious if you can if we can almost reason our way through what precept you're using to determine in which case is it accurate. Because I don't think that you would want to leave it down to purely intuition, right?
No.
So I'm curious, like, what sort of scenarios justify valuing consequences versus valuing character?
I kind of want to flip that around. I kind of want to
Okay.
maybe answer the opposite actually first. It's because that's the first thing that came to my mind, just sort of valuing
Yeah.
why would I value character over consequences? So for me, it comes down to the values and the that we kind of set forward, or that Aristotle set forward, that you can sort of maximize, right? Or virtues. These are sort of inherently just
Mm.
human things to do. Like they sort of like embody our humanity. Like what's the best of being human?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you ignore sort of, the essence of our humanity, it's no longer sort of like morality and sort of like through like the lens of human beings at that point.
Mm.
It's not even human, right? So I wouldn't even call that like a sense of morality.
Okay.
I mean, that was kind of poorly stated, but
No,
I hope you got the idea on that one a little bit.
I think so. So kind of, I mean, a way of saying what you're saying is you wouldn't want the demands of morality to be so great that they degraded like what it was to be a human being in the first place.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I mean, like if our morality shouldn't take away from being human.
So does that,
or at least the best parts of being human? And I think empathy is one of the best parts of being human. Like we're a social species.
I'm gonna have to clip that as a little soundbite and send it to Paul Bloom. Do you know his book Against Empathy?
No.
Oh, really? Okay. I mean, he's such a reach guest for us. I mean, he's like super famous. He's a psychologist at Yale. He wrote this whole book like detailing why empathy is a terrible thing.
That sounds like a silly book.
I have found parts of it fairly compelling, actually.
So would he prefer us to behave like robots?
No, but he thinks that juxtaposition is a false one.
Okay. All right. Then what would be the correct sort of dichotomy?
Well, I damn, I knew I shouldn't have said it. There was a point that I wanted to get to. I kind of meant that as a joke. There was something that I wanted to introduce anyway.
Okay.
Because I don't think empathy is the best like case here.
Yeah, fuck feelings.
So, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I wanted to go back to so maybe that precept that I was trying to get you to define was whenever the demands of morality reach beyond what it is to be a human, that's when you would shift from valuing consequences to valuing character.
Sure.
Okay. Now, see, I want to put a little pressure on this, because what if in the shallow pond example, it was saving one girl who had cancer and was likely to die in 6 months anyway? Would you then still save her instead of donate your shoes? Or, well, sorry, I should ask a different question. I'm not curious what you think you would do. I'm curious what you think you should do, because undoubtedly those are sometimes different answers.
Yeah. One's a lot more interesting too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I was kind of thinking like, what would I do? And they're just like, wow, okay, we know what we would do.
Would I save the girl drowning in front of me? What should I do?
I think we would, but I'm curious if we should.
Yeah, you should. You shouldn't watch a girl drown in front of you. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What if she was going to die tomorrow, the next day? Would it still be correct to save her?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, you should save the girl. You should
Now,
know.
are you saying? I'm just curious. Are you saying yes based on consequentialist reasoning or Aristotelian reasoning?
Definitely Aristotelian still.
Okay.
I think you really just shit the bed when it comes to sort of maximizing like that ethical curve.
Yeah.
You really do.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if she's gonna die 10 minutes after the fact,
Really?
even 10 minutes after the fact, I don't give a damn. I mean, if you are not behaving like a human being at that point, it's not moral.
Really?
Yes.
That's very interesting. So,
Mhm.
okay. Now I was questioning whether I'd bring these up, but now I think it's very appropriate too. Bernard Williams is this philosopher. I think he's passed away at this point. He definitely did. I think he wrote these in the 18th century or 19th century, maybe. No, 19th for sure. So he wrote these. He wrote this critique of consequentialism. That is, it's very relevant here. Have you ever heard of George the chemist and Jim the traveler?
No.
Okay, there are these. It, it's a very good two thought experiments that are meant to show that Adam's critique of consequentialism is true for almost all consequentialist reasoning. So let's start with George the chemist. So imagine there's this guy named George, and he's a PhD in chemistry, right? And he was working as a professor, but he got fired due to no fault of his own. But the department was just downsizing. The college was kind of going under, and he lost his position, right? So he has a wife and a kid at home, and they're really struggling to make ends meet. And he hasn't been able to get a job just because the job market's terrible, and he there's a lot of pressure being put on him from the house because they're starting to not be able to really afford to send their daughter to school anymore. Like things are getting really tough at home, and but they're making it work for now, but they don't know how long it's going to hold out. And one of George's friends comes to him and he says, "Hey, I actually have a job that I'd like to recommend for you, and it's a chemical engineering position at a biological weapons developmental factory." And George is super opposed to biological warfare. He thinks it's cruel and inhumane. But what's interesting is that if he doesn't take this job, someone more competent than him and with more zest for the job will take it instead. And this concern is even kind of creeping into his friends offering him the job because his friend doesn't even really agree with what he's doing. So what should George do in this scenario? Because you see how it's supposed to tease apart concerns about our own character and our own virtue from concerns about consequences, because all of the consequences stack up clearly on the side of taking the job. It would provide a great income for him and his family. They would get out of this terrible financial situation they're in. And he would actually be decreasing the efficacy of these biological weapons that he's so opposed to, because he could do just kind of a mundane job, just kind of let things pass. But the competitor for the job has a real zeal for what he's doing, and he's smarter than George, so he's going to actually do a better job at creating these weapons.
Yeah, I think in light of the competitor, you take the job. I think without the competitor, you don't take the job.
Interesting. So here you're valuing consequences over character.
It almost feels like a duty. It doesn't feel like, I mean, not that you should be happy with every moral decision you make. That's not but it almost feels like it's his duty to do so. If it wasn't the case that, let's flip this on this head. Let's say that the competitor was incompetent.
Mm-hmm.
And so there'd be like less death as a result of his competitor getting the job. It almost feels like the inverse would be true. That'd be like it would be his duty to reject the job, because it feels like I don't know, it feels like him taking the job, although not ideal, checks all the boxes, right? He wants to make sure his family's happy. He wants to, he may be against these biological weapons, but if he wants to minimize the damage they do, it would make more sense if he took the job.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, you probably take the job. I mean, you're not really sacrificing your humanity either.
Really? Okay.
I think
not in the same way as watching a child drown.
Yeah, I think in light of the competitor, that's what I'm saying. In light of the competitor,
Okay.
you're not sacrificing your morality.
I mean, I just thought of like a very twisted, I mean, we have discussed, like the trolley tracks, moral dilemma like 10 times on the show at this point.
Yeah.
But I was thinking of just like a very twisted version where, I mean, you're sitting in front of the one person on the track, but the 5 other people are not in view, right? So would you pull the lever at that point?
Which is basically the child problem, yeah.
Sure. But I mean, so thinking back to it, I guess wouldn't pull the lever if I was sitting right in front of the person and I was going to watch them die.
You mean kill the one?
I probably wouldn't kill the one if I was sitting in front of that.
Really?
I don't think I would. But
do you think that's the right thing to do?
Do I think that's the right thing to do? My gut tells me no.
Okay.
So I once again, it goes back to like kind of just you're really sacrificing so much more in the process. Like,
what are you saying is the correct thing to do? I'm just confused on what you're saying.
The correct thing to do is to allow the trolley to continue to kill the 5 people.
Really?
If you're just sitting there and watching that one person, but you can't see the other 5 people.
Really? Okay. I think I would very strongly disagree with that.
Why?
So I don't think that simply because you feel an emotion, I don't think that grants credence to its being correct or valid in a certain scenario. Or even if it is correct, I don't think that de facto means that it should overpower other moral concerns. So if you're saying that, like, I'm assuming the counterfactual is that if you could see both sets of people, you would divert it and kill the one. Sure. Yeah. Okay. So, I don't think that moving the people out of sight or out of mind invalidates all of the concerns that you had when they were right in front of you. And while understanding that the emotionality of it is going to be very different, I don't think that overrides the ethical concerns involved.
Wait,
no, but I think no, it doesn't, override, what the consequences will be.
But it makes you shift. But it makes you shift the value of character.
But I feel like you definitely sort of like, hid sort of the bias in your answer there, because I think you're really changing the process. The process is entirely changed now because you are really sacrificing a lot of your humanity by, sort of choosing to direct, the trolley to kill the person right in front of you. So, I mean, like it's through Aristotelian sort of view, you're really shooting your own empathy at that point. I like, for the sake of just like, a notion that overall the consequences are better.
See, I don't think that's. Go ahead, Brian.
Why wouldn't you be empathetic to the 5?
Because you're just much more empathetic to people that you're like you can see with your own eyes right in front of you. I mean, are you as empathetic towards your your parents as you are towards the people suffering in Africa?
Okay, I don't know. The trolley somehow feels like a different example entirely from the African child drowning in a pool example. What did you say for? It just feels different. I'm not really sure. I'm trying to dissect that right now. But what did you say for the child dying in the pool, Jordan?
You mean what do I think is correct to do?
Yeah.
This can get really complicated.
Okay.
No, I think no. It's a good question. So I think that even if you can save the 5 in Africa, you should still wade in and get the child, because I think in that scenario, it's. I mean, so here's the thing: is like from a God's eye view, the consequences are abstracted. They're better to save the 5 than the 1, right? That's obvious. We don't need to quibble about that. But there are more consequences than just that, right? So this is I'm totally agreeing with Adam here. Like it would be viscerally so disturbing, and it would be so hard to come back from. And anyone who saw you do it would think you're a monster, and you would have to live with these things that you've done for the rest of your life.
Yeah, there'd be societal implications.
Exactly, right. Exactly. And the consequences more broadly, I think, would be worse. And it's also you have to absorb the consequences of you being the type of person that could do that, right?
So what's different between that and the one and the sort of the thought experiment I just proposed with the trolley tracks?
Yeah,
I think yes, because it has to do with responsibility. It has to do with positive versus negative responsibility. You are much more positively responsible for the people on the tracks than you are the 5 children in Africa.
Why?
Well, because you're abstaining from doing something in the drowning girl case, but you're taking a positive action to not flip the switch when it's right in front of you.
No, you're abstaining from flipping the switch.
Yeah, but I view that as sort of a positive action.
No, but that you're just defining as a positive action. You're abstaining from flipping the switch, and you're abstaining from walking to the whatever you're going to sell the shoes.
I think there is a meaningful difference there, though. I think there is a meaningful difference between those two courses of action.
Okay, make the distinction.
Well, for one, you have to walk past the one person you're killing, and
yes,
go.
In this case, you would just have you would have to flip the switch and watch that person be killed.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you feel no pull towards the. So I feel pulled by both scenarios. You feel no pull towards the one and fully towards the other.
I mean, I feel,
because I don't know. It's really strange to me that like I feel very not at ease by the idea that if you simply tuck the people away, sticking with the trolley scenario, if you simply tuck the people away, what is ethically correct to do changes. I find that
I don't think so. Just because like the people in Africa, like the only reason we have no problem sort of disregarding them in this case is
we don't see them. Yeah,
it's just because they're more abstract than the people in the trolley. They're even more abstract. They're like, some people in Africa will be saved. Right. And it's just like, but in this case, it's like there are people on the trolley track, but there are people in Africa you could save. In both cases, that is the case. But one just seems more abstract.
Yeah, I think
we've never been to Africa. We've never, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I think the trolley problem, the word I'd use is direct. It feels like you're directly responsible, whereas in the Africa problem, it's implicit that you are directly responsible for those deaths, but it doesn't feel like it's entirely your fault. It's like, well, there's like political problems and stuff over there anyway, and that's kind of, I don't know, carried into the equation subconsciously. At least for me, that's what it feels like. Whereas with the trolley problem, it's like, no, I'm killing those people if I don't do X or do X. It depends on the scenario. So I think like how direct you're being with the trolley problem, I think that's the variable that makes me want to kill the one person as opposed to the 5, even though they're still like out of sight.
And I think also you're importing your own kind of like way of viewing things towards everyone here, where if you actually viewed things in a consequentialist framework and you were more drawn to that, I think that your argument against it would kind of fade away a bit. Because like if you, I mean, like even just like speaking myself, like I think I would be pretty haunted by the fact that I didn't save the 5 by flipping the switch. Because like it seems like sort of like inherent in your view is the fact that you think it's wrong to save the 5, and that's why you'd be so distraught about it. You think like, Jesus Christ, like I can't believe I actually watched that guy die. Like I shouldn't have done that. But if you actually genuinely believe that it would be wrong to save the 1, that would be what haunted you, not the reverse.
What do you think about this? I'm just trying. I mean, I'm just trying to like.
Know what I'm saying?
Oh no, I get what you're saying. I'm just trying to imagine like what that scenario would actually be like. You know, a person pleading for their life on the track. Don't flip the switch, please don't. Like I have, parents,
so do you think,
children. Like there's someone pleading to me, crying their eyes out on the track, and I'm like, but there are 5 people that I must save.
Wait. But are you sort of smuggling in here like the way that other people would view you and factoring into that?
No. What do you mean? I'm just talking about
painted that picture of like mothers and children like staring at you, like thinking you're a cold killer.
No, I think that's what he's saying. The person would be saying, and
yes, like in a real scenario, someone would be like, pleading for their life.
Sure. I was trying to ask, like, I was trying to question if we thought that those were, like, I'm not saying that they're not descriptively true. Like, of course, like people would in fact be feeling that, but I don't want to give. I'm not sure that I would want to commit like the naturalistic fallacy and say like anything we do feel is what we should feel, right?
But like, I don't think you're fully getting my point here. I'm just saying like the less human you make it,
yes,
the more consequentialist it gets. For example, like say that person like wasn't pleading for their life. Say that person was bound and gagged so they couldn't even look at me, right? Wait, what?
I said, or maybe even more compelling, just like a stoic who was sitting there just like accepting death.
Exactly. So the point where I'm just like, at that point, I really am just comparing the numbers. So you're right. Like with, the greater humanity of my, of my personality out of the picture. Yes, I will be looking at it in more of a consequentialist view. But I'm just saying, like the more human it gets, like the more social interaction between people, or just interaction between people, like the more I sort of veer toward like Aristotelian.
But I'm asking you to kind of define when that's valid, though, because we're sort of throwing up cases here. But I think that I would want it to be more than just purely like gut intuition. Is there some sort of because like if every choice that we're making here is defined by purely just like what we kind of gutturally react to, it doesn't seem to be a like cohesive, coherent ethical theory, right?
No, I mean I think life's a little more complicated than something I can make on the spot right now. But that's, I mean, fair. Yeah. You know what I mean? I'm just saying like one kind of bleeds into the other depending on just like just being a human being.
There's an interesting question that got asked, I think in response to you, Adam, in the live chat. So someone said, in a similar scenario, you're driving a car and then lose control, veering towards a group of people versus turning the car towards one person on the other side of the road and killing them. Does being closer to the choice change anything for you?
Oh no, that's actually a fantastic question. For me, like instant thought on that one is that I would veer toward the one person, just because there isn't that same level of humanity where I'm actually like I was saying before, if say there's like a lot of interaction between me and that person, mm-hmm. I'm going to be looking sort of Aristotelian, but the more you take the humanity out of it, I look more of like a, more in a consequentialist view. So, if I'm driving that car and I make like a snap decision, a crowd or one person? Oh, it's going to be the one person, right? Because I don't know this person. It's just purely the numbers at that point.
Yeah.
I've never interacted with that person. It's not going to haunt me, but but I think it's a little different given the interaction you have. Like, you know.
Okay. I I don't know. I maybe I'm like not seeing it. I don't know. I'm kind of struggling to see what and I don't maybe this could be like a I don't know, kind of a short intro to the next episode, but I'm really curious to hear like what defines what conditions define what is valid and invalid for determining your choice between like valuing character over valuing consequences.
I just told you though, it's so situational. It just is though. I mean, like I just gave you like you know the trolley track example. How one
No, I know.
just a few tiny things could change, and suddenly my decisions changed just because if they're bound and gagged and they can't plead for their life, and I can't really I can't make a human connection with this person. Well, I'm kind of looking at the numbers at that point.
I think
right,
it's
like
I think it's interesting to consider the variables that lead to the that lead to your change in choice. I think it'd be interesting to pin down because I think does sound like the closeness to the people, because you do get that interaction like you were talking about does impact your decision, and it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know. There's something that seems unstable about that to me.
Okay. Do you have an example?
Well, what about like because it seems like so valuing like proximity maybe as like a proxy for what's ethically relevant, it seems like it can lead to too many incompatibilities almost. Like what if you were walking down the street and you had $5 in your pocket, and you actually intended, okay, how about this? You intended to give that $5 to a person 10 blocks down the street, 20 blocks down the street, who you saw the previous day, and they're in rough shape. Like they don't have shoes. You can tell they're sleeping in like a sleeping bag, and it's the dead of winter. Like they could really use that $5 just I mean, for anything at that point. But you see this like, you know, other homeless person, but they're clearly better off. Like they don't have your or they don't have like a sleeping bag. You can tell they have like pretty good shoes. Yeah. So but what if this person really like hits home for you? Like they kind of remind you of yourself a little bit, like Jesus Christ, like there but for the luck of God go I. So you know, something like that. And the proximity triggers your empathy and you give it to that person instead of the person who it would have made more of a difference to.
Well,
it seems like it's sort of.
I do think you cut me short with that example though a little bit in terms of just you know just how a human someone like myself would behave. I'm not going to just if I went downtown to give money to someone, I was compelled to do this because this person made an impact on me in the first place for being in such desperate shape, but then I'm suddenly just swaying in the wind. I don't know what to do. And then suddenly I see someone that reminds me of myself and I have to just hand over my $5. I think that seems like maybe a facile way of a bit of a straw man,
Sure. I guess I didn't intend for it to be like that, but I was just trying to paint proximity as not being the most stable and reliable way to judge what's most ethically relevant.
I don't think it's the only variable. I think it goes into the pot, but I don't think it's the only thing by which.
I guess I'm trying to find what is that thing though, like that thing that tips the balance, or
right. Well, that's what I'm saying. It's not just one thing. Okay.
So you're sort of you're almost painting yourself, Adam, as maybe like some sort of the technical term for it would maybe be something like a moral realist who's like a pluralist about what value is relevant. So you're not denying that there are true and false, actually right and wrong answers to different scenarios, but you're saying that there's a plurality of things that factor into it. because like
I'm not even sure that I would even agree at this point that there is a right and wrong to everything.
Oh, join us next week when we discuss.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually given this conversation, I'm really, really not sure about that. So
That's triggered. No.
yeah.
Kidding. I would definitely describe myself as an ethical realist or a moral objectivist. That's interesting. I know we kind of have a hard stop on time. Maybe okay. So to kind of close out, okay. So Adam, that was a very roundabout way of maybe getting to the. We tended to focus on the converse of that, but the other side of that coin would be you're sort of challenging Aristotle and saying that there are some scenarios for you that they're abstracted impersonal scenarios that that would make his concerns about character invalid. Is that correct? And the counter to that is also true.
Sure.
Okay. Brian, what do you think about Aristotle at this point? Like, do you think Adam's critique is valid or not?
Towards the end there, I started to. It almost feels like I understand where Adam's coming from, although I don't agree with it. So I would say his critiques are valid, but they wouldn't align with my own morality, I think.
Okay, that's fair. What part did you differ with?
I think the proximity part. That it's not the only variable, like I said before, that I think Adam prescribes to, but I don't know. It'd be interesting to really suss out the other things that, if we could at all, that Adam, you feel like you are pulled by.
Yeah, I guess like I'm just sort of I don't know, Adam. Maybe think about this, and we can open with this before we do whatever topic we're doing next. But like, I'm curious for you to lay out the conditions wherein it's valid to value your own feelings and your own character over the consequences. Do you get what I'm saying?
That'd be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about this now, but like, I'm not sure there's like a defined moral framework to it. I'm not sure you could live by like a defined moral framework. Just considering like the way I've been thinking about this now. I don't think I could fit within just like a framework that would always work.
Maybe, but so irrespective of whether or not you could follow it, because so I mean, for me, like what is like being an ethical like realist or like an objectivist, I would never claim that I can follow what is correct all the time. But that doesn't mean that there is something that's correct. But that doesn't mean
I mean correct with like respect to what though? Right? I mean like with respect to like
morality.
No. I mean like there are competing, sort of ideals here, right? So I mean like going back to the trolley stop example or trolley train, whatever example. I really am valuing just my character in the moment and sort of that connection of humanity that I, like the degree that which I, sort of interact with the person. Mm-hmm. And you wouldn't value that as much. And so it's like, is this right with respect to what?
Yeah, we definitely can't flush that out in 4 minutes, which is the time we have left. But
it's a great segue.
It is. I mean, the short answer of it is I everything for me is grounded in terms of consequences. And there is I do have an argument for why that's the case. And I do have an argument for why in certain scenarios, I mean, again, I think it, even as much as I hate to say it, like mine does take an Aristotelian bend in that, I mean, making some of these hard choices, like walking past the child, right? That would be wrong. But it's in terms of consequences, because like if you kind of I don't know. Again, this really constitutes its own episode. But if you abstract things out and you look at like, I mean, morality at some point has to be. So I would probably describe myself as so sophisticated, but that doesn't mean it's not like that's a type of consequentialist. I'm not just saying like I'm sophisticated. I'm saying like that's a type of consequentialist, but a sophisticated rule-based consequentialist. That is my current position.
Rule-based.
Yes, not act-based. Yeah.
I definitely fall way more into action-based.
Same.
Okay.
Way more into action-based.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
It's even hard for me to understand why you'd be rule-based.
Yeah, we can explore this in another episode for sure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But I mean, in summary, I still think Aristotle is great on like interpersonal issues.
Oh, sure.
Yeah. All right. Well, we should close this out, I guess. If you're still listening at this point, first of all, I'm surprised, and second of all, thank you. But if you want to learn more, you can visit our website at that'sbs.fireside.fm. You can go to our Patreon and keep us able to do these episodes at patreon.com/that'sbs. You can find all of these episodes on RSS feeds. They're available on whatever you listen to. And of course, comment for sure, like what you kind of thought about our arguments here in this episode. And you can always email us for guest recommendations or topic recommendations at that'sbspodcast@gmail.com. So thanks for listening, and tune in next time. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode and learned something from it. And if you want to support my work and what I'm doing, you can do so by supporting me on Patreon. You can go to patreon.com/Jordan Myers and donate on a monthly basis and receive rewards for your donation. Again, that's JORDANMYERS. And the links to everything will be in the description below. If you can't monetarily support me, you can support me in other ways by liking this video, commenting on it below, reviewing the show on iTunes, or sharing it with a friend or with your Twitter followers. You can also email me at platoscavepodcast@gmail.com and follow me on Twitter at Jordan_C_Myers. And if you want, you can check out my other show called That's BS. It's a more discussion-based show with me and friends. I mentioned it at the top of this episode. So if you enjoyed this, please consider supporting me on Patreon. And as always, thanks for listening.